James Stewart. James Stewart wasn't just the charming, all-American actor we saw on the silver screen. He was a real-life war hero. At the peak of his Hollywood career, Stewart didn't hesitate when duty called. He became one of the first major movie stars to enlist in World War II, despite being underweight and initially rejected by the draft board. Determined, Stewart worked tirelessly to meet the physical requirements and eventually joined the U.S. Army Air Corps. But he didn't just serve, he soared. Stewart climbed the ranks to become a decorated bomber pilot, flying dangerous missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. His bravery earned him multiple medals, including the Distinguished Flying Cross and the French Croix de Guerre. After the war, Stewart returned to Hollywood a changed man. Quieter, more introspective, with a depth that audiences could feel in his later performances. Hollywood wanted to glamorize its stars, but Stewart's true legacy was forged not on set, but in the skies over Europe. He wasn't just acting the part of a hero, he was living it. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, could have stayed comfortably atop his throne when World War II broke out. But after the tragic death of his wife, Carole Lombard, in a plane crash while returning from a war bond tour, Gable made a life-altering decision. Devastated and determined to honor her memory, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces at 41 years old, an age when many thought he was too old for combat. Refusing any special treatment, Gable trained hard and flew multiple dangerous bombing missions over Europe as part of the 351st Bomb Group. He even filmed aerial combat footage for military training purposes. Hitler was reportedly so rattled by Gable's service that he offered a reward to anyone who could capture him alive. After completing his missions, Gable returned to Hollywood forever changed, haunted by the war but revered for his courage. While Tinseltown preferred to remember him as Rhett Butler, real history shows a man who swapped movie sets for battlefields and proved his heroism wasn't confined to fiction. Charles Bronson. Before Charles Bronson became the rugged face of Hollywood toughness, he lived a life even tougher than the roles he played. Born into extreme poverty as the 11th of 15 children, Bronson knew hardship from the very start. When World War II erupted, he didn't hesitate. He enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces. Serving as an aerial gunner on a B-29 Superfortress, Bronson flew dangerous missions over Japan and survived some of the deadliest encounters in the Pacific Theater. He earned a Purple Heart for wounds sustained during battle, a testament to the grit and resilience that would later define his acting career. After the war, Bronson returned to civilian life a hardened man with a steely stare that Hollywood would eventually immortalize. While audiences admired his cold, stoic characters on screen, few realized that Bronson's toughness wasn't an act. It was born in the skies during combat. Hollywood tried to package him as just another action star, but the real Charles Bronson was a warrior long before he ever stood in front of a camera. Paul Newman. Paul Newman, known for his piercing blue eyes and effortless cool, almost didn't make it to Hollywood at all. During World War II, Newman served in the U.S. Navy as a radioman and gunner on torpedo bombers. His dreams of becoming a pilot were dashed when it was discovered he was colorblind, but that didn't stop him from putting himself in harm's way. Stationed in the Pacific Theater, Newman narrowly escaped death when his unit was reassigned at the last minute, sparing him from the deadly Battle of Okinawa, where many of his fellow servicemen were lost. The experience left a deep mark on him, instilling a humility and seriousness that would later seep into his most iconic roles. While Hollywood celebrated his charm and charisma, few knew the weight he carried from his wartime service. Newman's real-life bravery and quiet resilience made him more than just a movie star. He was a man who had faced death and come back stronger. Behind the dazzling smile was a veteran who truly understood the value of life. Lee Marvin. Long before Lee Marvin became Hollywood's ultimate tough guy, he earned that reputation on real battlefields. At just 18 years old, Marvin enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps during World War II and was thrown straight into the brutal Pacific Theater. He fought in the Battle of Saipan, one of the bloodiest battles of the war, where he was seriously wounded by machine gun fire. His injuries were so severe that he was medically discharged, but not before earning a Purple Heart. Those scars, both seen and unseen, stayed with him for life, adding a raw authenticity to every grizzled character he later portrayed on screen. Hollywood loved his rugged persona, but few realized that Marvin's world-weary toughness wasn't just acting, it was hard-earned experience. Every glare, every gravelly line he delivered carried the weight of real battles survived and real brothers lost. In a town built on make-believe, Lee Marvin stood out because his toughness was the real deal. No script could outdo the life he had already lived. Tony Curtis. Before Tony Curtis became one of Hollywood's most charismatic leading men, he lived a very different kind of adventure. Born Bernard Schwartz to poor immigrant parents, Curtis grew up tough on the streets of New York. When World War II broke out, he didn't hesitate. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy at just 17 years old. Curtis served aboard the USS Proteus, a submarine tender, and was present during the historic surrender of Japan in Tokyo Bay. The discipline, hardship, and exposure to global events during his service deeply shaped his ambition. After the war, Curtis used the GI Bill to study acting, eventually transforming himself into the Hollywood icon we know today. Beneath his dazzling smile and undeniable charm was a young man who had seen the world at war and understood the value of opportunity. Hollywood loved to spotlight his good looks and playful spirit, but the real Tony Curtis carried the grit and resilience of a veteran who had witnessed history firsthand and refused to waste a second of the life he fought to protect. Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda wasn't just a Hollywood legend. He was a man who believed in action over fame. At the height of his career during World War II, Fonda stunned Hollywood by walking away from the spotlight to enlist in the U.S. Navy. He famously said, "I don't want to be in a fake war in a studio," choosing instead to experience the real thing. Serving as a quartermaster aboard the USS Satterley, Fonda took part in dangerous operations in the Pacific and earned a Bronze Star for his bravery. His wartime service left a permanent mark on him, giving him a quiet gravitas that would later define his iconic roles. Hollywood tried to paint him as the clean-cut, all-American hero, but few realized how deeply that image was rooted in real experience. Fonda's calm intensity on screen wasn't just great acting. It came from a man who had stared down real danger and come through it stronger. In an industry of make-believe, Henry Fonda brought a rare authenticity that no script could ever replicate. Jack Palance. Before Jack Palance became synonymous with the villainous, tough-as-nails characters in Hollywood, he lived a life far more intense than anything the movies could create. Growing up in poverty in Pennsylvania, Palance joined the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II, where he served as a bomber pilot. His time in combat was nothing short of harrowing. He flew numerous bombing missions over Europe, surviving close calls with enemy fire and the constant threat of death. Palance was awarded the Purple Heart after being wounded during one mission, but the scars, both physical and emotional, stayed with him long after the war ended. Hollywood didn't know it at the time, but the hard-edged Palance brought to the screen came from a man who had truly faced life-and-death situations. Whether it was playing a ruthless villain or a tragic antihero, Palance's performances were infused with the gravity of real experience. He was more than a Hollywood tough guy. He was a war hero whose bravery off-screen gave his on-screen roles an authenticity few could match. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas was more than just a Hollywood titan. He was a warrior, both on and off the screen. At the height of his fame, during World War II, Douglas enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he served as a communications officer on a submarine tender in the Pacific. The experience was nothing short of life-changing. During one mission, he narrowly escaped death when his ship was hit by enemy fire. He later received a Purple Heart for his injuries, a reminder of the dangerous waters he navigated, not just in Hollywood but in real life. What set Douglas apart from other stars was his refusal to be defined by his fame. After the war, he didn't just return to the screen. He became one of the most versatile and respected actors of his time. The intensity and grit he brought to characters like Spartacus and Vincent van Gogh were not just performances. They were born of a man who had faced death and emerged with a deep understanding of what truly matters in life. Telly Savales. Telly Savales wasn't just the tough, bald-headed icon of Hollywood. He was a man who knew true adversity. Before he became famous for his role as the tough detective Kojak, Savales served in the U.S. Army during World War II. He was stationed in the South Pacific, where he worked as a technician in the Army Signal Corps. His time on the front lines, while less glamorous than the action roles he would later take on, gave him a unique perspective on life and war. Savales, known for his distinct voice and commanding presence, carried the weight of his wartime experiences in everything he did. His performances were marked by a quiet intensity, reflecting the lessons learned on the battlefield. Though Hollywood may have loved to portray him as an indestructible force of nature, the real Savales was a man who had witnessed the brutalities of war firsthand and carried that realism with him. His toughness wasn't an act, it was hard-earned, and his legacy proved that not all heroes wear capes.